let me ask you, where do you go when you need to recoup, relax, get reinvigorated? Is there a certain place you go? Well, for hundreds of years, maybe even thousands of years, people have gone to hot springs to get well because they thought the waters provide healing for them. When we talk about hot springs in our country, we think of a place called Hot Springs. Hot Springs, Arkansas. Did you know that in the 1830s, President Andrew Jackson designated the area that would become Hot Springs, Arkansas as a national park? They didn't use that word then, but it became a national park. And actually, it is older as a national park than Yellowstone is. Now, in the 1900s, 1916, after the National Park Service became a thing, they kind of redesignated it, so it may not actually be the oldest part of the National Park Service. But in 1830s, Andrew Jackson said, this place is special. People can come here, they can get reinvigorated. They can get renewed. Well, today we're going to talk about a place kind of like Hot Springs, Arkansas. It's a place called the Pool of Bethesda. It's in Jerusalem. It's kind of on the northeast side of the city, kind of near the temple there. And it's a place that people coming in the city, they would stop and they would maybe rest. But also the Pool of Bethesda was another special place. Lots of lame, disabled, sick people would go there thinking they could get well there. Well, Jesus is going to come to the pool in our story today as we look at the scriptures. And Jesus is going to encounter a man there. And in this process, we're going to learn that Jesus is Lord over all creation and values all people. So in last week's lesson, we talked about the lady at the well, the woman at the well in Samaria. She encountered Jesus and Jesus talked to her and salvation came to that city and Jesus stayed there for a little while and taught those people. Well, then Jesus moved on into Galilee and he did some more signs there, did some more work there and healed some people and did a few things. Well, in today's account, we're going to see Jesus return to Jerusalem and he's going to be at the Pool of Bethesda. And let's see what happens there when he gets to the pool. One man was there who had been disabled for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and realized he had already been there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the disabled man answered, "I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred. But while I'm coming, someone goes down ahead of me." "Get up," Jesus told him. "Pick up your mat and walk." Instantly, the man got well, picked up his mat, and started walking. Now, I want you to use your holy imagination here just for a second. I want you to imagine this place, this pool. Jesus walks up. And this isn't just like a little pond. It's a complex. And there's people all around. There's a lot of disabled, sick, lame people at the pool. And Jesus encounters this one man at the pool. The scripture tells us he had been lame for 38 years. Right now, we don't see that it says lame, but we're going to discover that in the process. 38 years of laying by this pool, trying to get well. What does Jesus ask the man? Look at verse 6. "Do you want to get well?" And what does the man say? "I have no one to put me in the pool when the water is stirred up." How would you characterize Jesus' attitude toward the disabled man, and how would you describe the disabled man's attitude toward Jesus? Now, for some reason, Jesus focuses in on this man. Out of all the people around, he focuses on this one man who's laying there. Now, we don't understand exactly why Jesus picked just one man. We don't understand how God works all the time, why God does one thing and not another thing. But we can know this. God does everything for a purpose of glorifying himself and furthering his gospel agenda. But it's also interesting that this man had a response to Jesus. "I can't get in the water. I can't get down there. Someone beats me to it. No one will help me get into the water." See, this man's discouraged because they've got this understanding, this weird magical idea that an angel comes down and touches the water, stirs up the water, and that if you get in the water, you can be healed. I don't know where they got this idea. I don't know if it was true. But regardless, this man's discouraged because he has a magical understanding of how God works. God is a first come, first served type of God. If I do this practice, if I get in the water real fast, Jesus will heal me. God will heal me. Well, that's not how God works. He's discouraged because he has a faulty understanding of God's grace. I want you to stop a moment. I want you to consider this question. How can a poor understanding of the nature and character of God lead to discouragement and disillusionment? A.W. Tozer said that what a man thinks about God is the most important thing about that man. When we have a faulty understanding of who God is and how God acts and how God loves and how God interacts with us, we have a faulty understanding of that, we're going to get discouraged. This man, he had a faulty understanding of God. He thought God did a magic trick, and if we just respond to that magic trick, he'll be healed. See, that's a faulty understanding, and he got discouraged. If we have an understanding that God's going to just bless me with all kinds of money and I don't get it, then I'm going to be discouraged. If I have a faulty understanding that because I'm a follower of Jesus, that life's just going to be nice and rosy and peaceful all the time, nothing bad's ever going to happen, I'm going to get discouraged because I have a faulty understanding about God and who God is. See, Jesus is just telling this man, I can heal you. Think back to our opening statement. Jesus is the Lord over all creation and values all people. Now, doctors and scientists can do a lot about our ailments. A doctor can do all kinds of things with our bodies and help us get well. A scientist can put together mechanical parts and make prosthetic limbs for people. But you see, they're simply using created items in an innovative way to help people. Jesus says, get up, pick up your mat and walk. See, Jesus is the creator, sustainer of the universe. He created our bodies. He has the ability to just look at us and go, get up. And all of a sudden the tendons and the nerves and the muscles and all the alignments in our brain click together. And boom, we get up. See, Jesus is the creator, and the creator can heal just without even doing anything. You just get up. And all we got to do is get up and we'll be healed. You see, this man woke up this morning. Just like the Samaritan woman woke up in our previous study that morning, not expecting anything to be different. Just another day, for her, another day to go get some water. For him, just another day to lay by the pool, try and get well. See, Jesus encountered their life, and Jesus had compassion on them. As we go about our lives day to day, we're going to encounter people who are just having another day. Another day at work, like the woman getting water. Another day being discouraged because life's rough, like this man. And we encounter those people. And we need to remember that we need to offer compassion to all people. When we do this, we can act like Jesus, and we can be the agent of change in people's life. So Jesus encounters this man, and he heals the man. The man gets up, picks up his mat, and goes about his day. But let's see what happens after he picks up his mat and starts to walk. John 5:9-13. Now that day was the Sabbath, and so the Jews said to the man who had been healed, "This is the Sabbath. The law prohibits you from picking up your mat." He replied, "The man who made me well told me, 'Pick up your mat and walk.' Who is this man? Who told you, 'Pick up your mat and walk'?" They asked. But the man who was healed did not know who he was, because Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there. Now, I want us to use our holy imagination again just for a moment. I want you to imagine the scene. Jesus walks up to this man. He's talking to him. Maybe he kneels down. Maybe he leans over. He leans into this man. He says, "Do you want to get well?" And the man says, I do, but I can't get to the pool." Jesus says, "Pick up your mat and walk." So the man stands up. Now, I don't think he just stood up and go, well, that's neat. I think there might have been a little bit of commotion. I think some other people noticed this man who'd been laying for 38 years standing up. I think he might have tested out his legs. I think he might have, spun around. I don't know. But in our holy imagination, let's not picture a boring scene where Jesus just says, "Pick up your mat and walk," and the guy walks away. I want you to just, in your imagination, think about this guy who's been healed, what he's going to do when that happens. But there's more happening. Look at verse 9 again. Now that day was the Sabbath. Now that phrase is supposed to stop the reader in their tracks. Now, up until now, we didn't know as a reader of the text, the first time, if you didn't know it was coming, we didn't know that the day itself was special. We thought it was a normal day. The guy's by the pool. Jesus walks up. Just a normal day. But see, now we see that Jesus has done something that's going to stop these folks and go, "Oh, hold up. Jesus, you can't tell that guy." Well, you can tell him, but it'd be wrong for him to pick up his mat today. You see, because today's the Sabbath day. And over the years, God had told them to honor the Sabbath. But since God told them to honor the Sabbath, they've been adding some regulations on top of what God said do. They'd added a whole bunch of rules and they codified some laws and said you can't do this and you can't do that. And one of the things you cannot do on the Sabbath is pick up your mat and carry it and walk. But Jesus told this man, pick up your mat and walk. So the people who are reading this, even the people around are going, oh, hold up, we can't do that. And that's why the religious leaders stopped him. They said, what are you doing? You can't carry your mat today. You can't do that. You can't walk around with that. That's wrong. God said, God said, you can't do that. Well, in reality, they said that. God didn't say that. They had placed some rules on top of what God had wanted them to do. So what's the man do? He says, well, the guy who healed me told me to pick it up. You see, a lot of folks want to disparage the man at this. They want to say, well, he's deflecting. He's trying to get out of trouble. No, I think this guy who just been healed was told by somebody who healed him, who had authority over his life in some way, said to pick up the mat. And I think this guy simply telling the religious leaders, well, that guy who healed me told me to pick up the mat. What do you think I'm supposed to do? Leave it? No, I don't know what to do. So the question for us is, how do we sometimes get caught up in man-made rules and regulations of church culture and miss the spiritual healing experienced by new believers? Sometimes we get caught up on the language used by a new believer instead of the fact that they have been healed and now are going through a slow sanctification process. It's going to change the way they think and the way they speak and the way they act. Sometimes we get caught up on the, quote, inappropriate attire that someone might wear to church instead of being excited that they're excited to actually come to church for the first time in 30 years. So we need to remember that like Jesus here, and unlike the religious leaders here, we need to affirm that Jesus works in the lives of all people, even when they don't always, quote, know how to act. Now, the man who'd been healed, he didn't know who healed him. Jesus kind of faded away into the crowds there. And he couldn't tell the religious leaders who healed him. He didn't know. But Jesus doesn't lead this guy to his own devices. Let's keep trucking. Let's look and see what happens next. After this, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, "See, you're well. Do not sin anymore, so that something worse doesn't happen to you." The man went and reported to the Jews that it was Jesus who made him well. Therefore, the Jews began persecuting Jesus because he was doing these things on the Sabbath. Now, this passage might sound a little confusing. You might be a little confused about what Jesus is saying. But let's first say what Jesus is not saying. Jesus is not saying that the man's lameness was caused by a sin. Later in John chapter 9, we see another event where the disciples ask, well, why is this man blind? Is it because his parents sinned or because he sinned? And Jesus says it's not because of that. So this man's lameness that he healed at the pool of Bethesda is not because of his sin. That's not what Jesus is saying. Let's go back and let's use our holy imagination again, and let's picture this scene in the temple. Jesus finds a man, and Jesus says maybe something like, "Oh, look at you, the walking around guy. Aren't you healed? This is amazing." And I imagine the guy smiling at him, kind of recognition. "Hey, you're the guy who healed me. I didn't get to say thank you. I didn't get to talk to you before. You're that guy." And Jesus, he looks at me and goes, "Now, hold up. Don't be a sinner. Because there are some things that being a sinner might cause to happen in your life, and those things are worse than being lame." And Jesus could have been talking about like the fact that if you keep sinning, you're going to miss out on eternity with the Lord. But this is pre-cross, pre all that. Who knows what it is? It could be saying that don't be someone who's always bad-mouthing and down and being discouraged like you have been in your life. Don't do that now that you're in this place. We don't know why Jesus says this exactly. But Jesus says there's worse things than being lame, so follow the Lord. In our life, we have things that happen to us. And Jesus says, follow the Lord. But look again. What does the blind man do in response to this? Does he suddenly sit down and say, "Jesus, teach me"? No. He goes and tells the religious leaders who healed him. Now again, people want to get down on the guy. Like, oh, look, he's ratting Jesus out. I think this guy is simply going to the authorities because he doesn't know and says, "Hey, that's the guy you're asking about. That's the guy who healed me." Now, in chapter 9, we have this other healing, and there the man acts differently. Because the man understands who Jesus is. The man is learning about who Jesus is. This lame guy at the pool of Bethesda, he doesn't get it. He doesn't really know who Jesus is. And it's interesting, we don't know why Jesus picked him. He doesn't know why Jesus picked him. We don't really know exactly what the whole point here was in this man over all the others. And it seems like this man didn't get it. And so we don't really, it didn't lead to salvation. We don't really know. So here's a question for us to ask ourselves. Why might Jesus act in a person's life even when they do not recognize him? Now, we don't know what the purpose of this man's healing was in terms of his personal life. I mean, besides the fact that he healed and God had grace and mercy on him for that. And we do know it caused the leaders to now start to persecute Jesus more, which is leading to what Jesus is here to do. It's leading toward the cross. And so we know it played that purpose, and that's an important aspect of this. But we don't know why Jesus acts in people's lives and when they don't recognize him. We don't know why the Lord does things in unbelievers' lives when they don't recognize him. But I think all these things, again, goes back to God's purpose in glorifying himself and furthering his gospel agenda. He is doing things in people's lives all around us, leading them toward the gospel, leading people around them toward the gospel even. So for us today, as we head out, as we finish up this lesson, I want you to consider a challenge. In your regular errands and outings, where are you likely to encounter people who are hurting or who have been marginalized? Recognize those potential encounters. What can you do to prepare to minister to them and show them compassion? Jesus is Lord over all creation, and he cares for all people. And if we are going to be followers of Jesus, we need to care for all people because we follow the Creator, and the Creator cares about the people he created. So I want to challenge you this week. Keep your eyes out for those who are marginalized. Keep your eyes out for those who are discouraged. Keep your eyes out for those who need a touching hand, who need a little help, who just need to be encouraged. Keep an eye out for them. And prepare yourself now to minister to them when the Lord presents them to you.